Alright, let's settle this. In case you didn't know, throughout the latter half of 2025, All Elite Wrestling's Mercedes Moné has been on a belt collector run with the specific intent of breaking Ultimo Dragon's 10-belt record from 1996 to 97. And if you don't know about that, I made a whole video about it that you should check out too. She's even calling herself Ultimo Moné, even though Ultimo Moné was right there. So did Mercedes Moné actually beat Ultimo Dragon's record? Well, here's the thing, there's not really a definitive answer to that, because there are a lot of semantics involved. Let me first put this in the simplest way possible if you just want the straight answers, and then I'll explain why afterward. Are you talking about belts or championships? If the question is whether Mercedes Moné beat Ultimo Dragon's record for simultaneous active championship reigns, the answer is maybe. That might change after this video. I'm recording this in November 2025, but it looks like the angle is peaking with her AEW Women's World title shot. And honestly, I don't follow AEW closely enough to know if it looks like this is going to be the end or not. But if the question is whether she beat his record for winning simultaneous physical belts, the answer is yes. But before I get into the meat of this, I'm going to say three things. 1. You really can't get too precious about any record in pro wrestling. Records are meant to be broken, nothing can stay forever, and nostalgia only gets you so far before you need to move on and embrace something new, and it's not always going to be the thing you want. 2. Mercedes Moné has been a huge Dragon Gate fan for a long time. She's used the Meteora for her entire career because she was heavily inspired by Shima. She holds Ultimo Dragon in the highest regard. Do you think she'd be doing all this if she wasn't? It's not like she's feuding with him, or building to a match, and outside of Dragon Gate itself, Ultimo's not even in the current wrestling zeitgeist, other than mostly veteran tag matches. She's the one who brought him up, and what she's doing is specifically a tribute act. I'd even go so far as to say she's a bigger fan of the source material than anyone criticizing her for this. If anything, she's bringing Ultimo Dragon and the J-Crown legacy to the attention of a new generation of fans who might not have been around to witness that historic run. So if you're coming into this with a bias about her being a fake fan or whatever, sorry wrestle nerds, she's fully legit. And 3, it's a work. It's a work. She is absolutely doing this as a bit. There's a reason why she has several belts that don't really count, and a reason why she's using the term belts instead of titles or championships, and that's because Mercedes Moné is a heel. This is supposed to be obnoxious. You're supposed to point out that some belts are inactive, and some aren't really championships, and some are unofficial reigns, and some have no history, and newer fans, you're supposed to look back and nitpick the legitimacy of Ultimo Dragon's championships to defend Moné. That's the whole point of this. You can actually this all you want, but it's entirely deliberate. Besides, the longer this goes, the more people check out my videos about it. And don't you want me to get ad revenue? Anyway, the storyline is as follows. In mid-2025, Moné already had collected a few international title belts, but she lost the New Japan Strong title to Azumi. She won a women's championship title shot after winning the Owen Hart Cup in AEW, but she lost to Toni Storm at All In Texas, and now she's overcompensating with as many belts as she can collect, and spreading herself way too thin. To quote a Discord buddy of mine, her gimmick is being insecure and punching down to make herself feel powerful, and it's not a coincidence that when she got an opportunity for the Women's World Championship, the belt that would count the most, she choked. So consider this. Mercedes Moné, the former Sasha Banks, is an actual literal WrestleMania main eventer, which is a huge deal whether you care about that company or not. I don't, and I'm still willing to admit it's basically the peak of the industry. Think about how easy it is for her to waltz into any indie promotion in the world and say, I will sell out your entire small venue show and make your brand visible internationally until I finish this storyline, if you let me carry one of your belts on TV for a few months. I work in the indies. Promoters throw themselves at stuff like this, and those belts will always have that legacy on record. So she's most likely turning down offers. She doesn't have to scour the globe for 6 months for obscure technicalities to beat this record. She could get 100 right now if she wanted to. And the woman playing this character, Mercedes Varnado, definitely knows this. Mercedes grew up idolizing Japanese junior wrestling. If simply having physical belts regardless of context was the only criteria, the great Sasuke would have beaten Ultimo's record too. Sasuke had 13 at one point because several were inactive, which also opens up the floor to symbolic awarded belts, personal collections, and retired and unified championships. My point is, what does count? What is the actual question we're asking about this? So here are the facts about Mercedes Moné's championships, and I'll get into each specific one in a bit. 2 of her belts represent one merged championship. Another is a tournament trophy. Another is an interim title while the real champion is injured. 2 other titles didn't exist before she won them. Not all of them are world titles, if that matters, depending on whatever rules we're using. And since there's no official designation of what the rules are for a record, we're basically playing Calvin ball with all of this. But, and oh my god Becky, this is a big but, if everyone complaining about Moné was applying the exact same logic to Ultimo Dragon, some of his technically wouldn't count either. I know, blasphemy, but it's coming from me, and believe me, I research this stuff way deeper than you do. Seriously, my original video consumed my life for a few months and I'm still maybe not okay. So here are the facts about Ultimo Dragon's championships. A couple years before the infamous picture, he bought one of those belts from CMLL and booked himself as champion. Though to be fair, he did defend it, and he booked other people to win it too. Sasuke had it for 4 years in Michinoku Pro, so it was still active even if he decided what happened to it. And because people always bring up that the J-Crown titles only count as one because they were unified, sorry, but that's wrong. Each contender had an active title reign coming in, all of the titles changed hands in every round of the tournament, and each of those counted as individual title reigns. Sasuke won the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title 4 months before winning the J-Crown tournament, and that's considered one seamless IWGP reign. The WAR title was also defended individually and split off the J-Crown, and that wasn't because the J-Crown was falling apart, it was still going strong at the time, so it was big news to drop it down to 7 championships. And after the J-Crown was dissolved because of WWF's interference dropping it down to 6 belts, much like Sasuke's reign going into the tournament, Otani continued a seamless IWGP reign after he vacated the rest. So think of the J-Crown like a wrestling championship Voltron. It's one larger entity comprised of individual parts that can split off, but not strictly one thing. Now, do we also count Ultimo's 11th title, the WAR 6-Man Tag Championship? He won that in October 1996 with Tenryu and Araya after winning the J-Crown, but before winning the WCW Cruiserweight. There was no official vacancy of the 6-man titles, even though some websites claim they were retired the same day they won them. That's most likely retroactive bookkeeping because they returned the following summer in a tournament. The team stopped defending it after that, and Ultimo Dragon left WAR in early 1997 to focus on his North American obligations, but that wasn't until after he lost the J-Crown. I only suggest this title also counts because if Mercedes Moné is counting multiple technically inactive titles as part of her record, then I suspect that if she was a current tag team champion, she'd be counting her tag belt too. Her and Athena didn't win the tournament, but if they did, you know she would. That's why I say so much of this is semantics and entirely depends on what counts. If you're complaining about this, what is the exact question you're asking and what are your exact criteria? Do you even know? So, okay, fine, let's get pedantic then. Let's look at each of Moné's belts. And you know I did research on this because it's me, of course I did. RevPro Undisputed British Women's Championship and SWE Queen of Southside. RevPro is the biggest promotion in the UK and has its own women's title. In 2019, they absorbed indie promotion Southside Wrestling Entertainment and all its championships, including the Queen of Southside title, which was defended separately in RevPro until 2023 when Alex Windsor unified them. The Queen of Southside title has been inactive ever since. It's not defended individually, and the RevPro Women's Champion is not referred to as a double champion, hence undisputed. So the second belt is an accessory representing the lineage only. Moné won the RevPro title at Wrestle Dynasty in January 2025, but she isn't also considered the SWE Queen of Southside champion because that doesn't exist anymore. Owen Hart Foundation Women's Tournament 2025 winner. AEW awards this every year to the winner of the Owen Hart Cup. The winner of the tournament gets a world title shot, but it's not cashed in like a briefcase, which is why Moné still has hers after she failed to beat Toni Storm for the women's title. Whoever wins the tournament next year gets their own belt, and they don't have to beat Moné for it. They get to keep it. Britt Baker still has hers. It's a trophy that just happens to be in belt form. And if trophies counted, several Stardom champions would have shattered this record already because they get trophies with every title win and every defense. AEW TBS Championship. All Elite Wrestling, let's say occasionally, has a ranking system where wins and losses matter and determine number 1 contenders. So when they debuted a very green Jade Cargill and gave her a Goldberg undefeated streak, her stats became a problem because keeping her undefeated meant they'd have to put the women's title on someone who had only been wrestling for a few months. Enter the TBS Championship, which, much like the men's TNT Championship, is an unranked television title that can be defended through open challenges. Moné won it in May 2024, and after 508 days, she finally surpassed Jade's original reign. So hey, she's breaking records after all. CMLL World Women's Championship. CMLL is the oldest wrestling promotion in the world, and please don't make me research another CMLL title, I might actually die. Oh wait, this one's not that weird because it didn't show up until after NWA messed with all the men's titles, so no weird spin-offs and historic versions or whatever. This one's been to Japan a few times, it's been vacated a bunch of times, but otherwise it's pretty consistent and has featured some rad-as-hell luchadoras and joshis. Moné won this from Zeuxis at a co-produced AEW CMLL show in June 2025. EWA Women's Championship. European Wrestling Association has been active since 2002 and holds events mostly in Austria and Czech Republic, and occasionally Liechtenstein. Their women's championship is only a couple years old, but they used to have a ladies' championship that preceded it several years before. Ladies. Moné won this in June 2025 in a triple threat. Primetime Wrestling Women's Championship and Bestia Women's Championship. These were both from the same event in July 2025, with Poland's Primetime Wrestling and Italy's Bestia Wrestling both introducing their inaugural women's championships at a co-promoted event. Bestia was previously using Italian Championship Wrestling's title belts until recently. PTW had a partial tournament to introduce theirs, but the rest of it was cancelled due to injury, so only one contender, Diana Strong, was named as a finalist. And since Moné and Strong were already supposed to be fighting over the new Bestia Women's Championship, the PTW Women's title was also added to that match. So neither has any history, but they're both still active championships. Discovery Wrestling Scottish Women's Championship. Discovery is a Scottish indie that's currently run by Joe Hendry.
Say his name, man.
Hey, none of that. I just cleared up a bunch of copyright strikes on my other Ultimo Dragon video. Anyway, they run almost exclusively in Scotland. Hey, I said no. But Moné defeated the previous champion Emerson Jane at RevPro's 13th Anniversary Global Wars show in August 2025, with her RevPro title also on the line. Body Slam Women's Championship. Body Slam runs in Denmark and regularly features Axel Tischer and Big Damo as Sanity. How they got away with hanging onto that name and the entrance music is anyone's guess. Moné won this in October 2025 after beating the Scandinavian Hurricane Alice Inc., who you may have seen in Stardom, and who defended it quite a bit during her 3-year reign. Ring of Honor Interim Women's Television Championship. And this is the dead giveaway that this whole gimmick is taking the piss. After 2 belts people were already arguing over, Moné won a contingency belt for a secondary women's title in AEW's secondary promotion. Mina Shirakawa won a 4-way to name the interim champion, and Moné beat her at WrestleDream in October 2025. But this isn't me making up some technicality about lineal championships or whatever. Interim reigns are very rarely legitimized retroactively. What usually happens is a unifying match when the champion returns, and if the interim champion wins that match, that's the start of their actual reign. And they totally know that. Winnipeg Pro Wrestling Women's Championship. WPW, as the name implies, is located in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. One night after WrestleDream in October 2025, Mercedes beat Jody Threat, who was in her second reign with the title. They promoted it as a huge event specifically because of this match, and if Moné is starting on Canadian belts, there are quite a few she could pick up right in my area. But what's interesting about that belt is, why go to 12? She could have stopped at 11, just breaking the 10-belt record in Ultimo's photo. That means she likely knew about the WAR 6-man, and that someone would call her out on a technicality. And considering I've never seen anyone else cover that belt in an Ultimo Dragon retrospective, and it's my most watched video ever, and I work with Canadian promoters and Jody Threat herself, and Moné's a huge Ultimo and Dragon Gate stan, guys, I can't prove it, but I think this one might be my fault. And if so, hey Mercedes, welcome to my channel. APAC Women's Championship. APAC Wrestling is a promotion in Malaysia and has been running since 2020, and it actually has a pretty decent budget, and it's one of the top wrestling promotions in Southeast Asia. But Mercedes didn't have to go to Malaysia for this because their longtime champion, Nor Phoenix Diana, who has held this title for 2 years, showed up at a House of Glory supercard in New York in November 2025, and Moné defeated her for it. Ring of Honor Women's Television Championship, for real this time. Remember like a minute ago when I said that if an interim champion beats a returning champion, a new reign starts and the interim reign is invalidated? Well, that's what happened in mid-November 2025. So even though Moné had an extra belt, she was not a legitimate champion until she beat Red Velvet. And they did it to make you mad about it. So this one didn't count at first, but now it does. But if she's carrying around both belts after this, one of them doesn't count, and she's doing that because it's hilarious, and she knows some of you hate fun. I wanted to wait to put this out until Moné finally started losing belts, because that would probably be the beginning of the end for this gimmick, but I also wanted to get it out in a timely manner, so the disclaimer I will run here is that she might still beat it legitimately after this. And that's fine. I'll post something in the description or the comments below if that's the case. It's too bad this run couldn't include the New Japan Strong title, which is now on Saya Kamitani, or the IWGP Women's title, because there was some speculation that Shuri might have been the one to show up at WrestleDream. Either would have been a great nod to New Japan's history of hosting the original J-Crown tournament, but they seem to be keeping both belts in Stardom for now. Another argument I've seen is whether Moné will keep defending all of these or just vacating them. In 1996, several Japanese promotions had working relationships, but it's a bit trickier now to trade a bunch of belts between modern indies in multiple countries. But again, she's a heel and it's a work, so while I'd be surprised if she defended each of these individually, I suspect we might see something like her dropping all the European ones at once to someone in that scene. And there is an actual Austrian on the AEW roster, just saying. Or if they don't do that and she does defend all of them, then the story is that she spread herself too thin and that's the reason why the whole thing falls apart. The other possibility here, and this is just me completely throwing theory spaghetti at a fantasy booking wall, is that this part of the story isn't about Ultimo Dragon at all, and that her belt collector run is actually in its Jushin Thunder Liger era, which would mean the next step is to lose only one championship to start a chain of events that makes it start crumbling. We can probably gloss over the month that El Samurai held it because he was a V0 defense, but the step after that would be the Shinjiro Otani era, where a promotion forces her to vacate a title, not Mercedes herself, the way WWF did with the light heavyweight. That's if she wants to stay fully thematic with this story. It might be a little too on the nose, but to be fair, there's very little in mainstream wrestling that isn't. I'm going to ignore a lot of the arguments and semantics. I'm sticking to my assessment of active championship reigns. That means one of Moné's is not active, one is not a championship, and one is in limbo. I'm going to say all of Ultimo's singles belts did count, even the one he owned, because they were all defended in various active promotions and kept being defended after he lost them, despite some of their origins being inactive promotions. I'm also going to say that Moné's active single championships do count. Whether they existed before she won them, and whether or not you care about those indies or think they're important, is completely irrelevant. In 1996, how much did you care about the lineage of Ultimo's belts, especially the ones from dead lucha promotions that were revived by Japanese indies specifically for Liger's tournament idea? Belt prestige is subjective, and Moné is getting these indies a lot of attention they wouldn't have otherwise. And they should get it, because there are a lot of talented women in Europe, Mexico, and Canada. I even work with a bunch of them. Shoutouts to my homegirls. But again, if you just want the facts, here's the final tally. But the narrative, which is probably going to be canonized according to most Western fans, is that she beat Ultimo's record, including the WAR one, whether or not that's actually true. And that's the most important point here, because as most wrestling fans should already know, once the hype train gets rolling, the facts don't really matter. Anyone remember when Jon Stewart of all people prevented John Cena from getting his 16th World Championship in a segment that definitely did not age well? Cena's record was from championships all in the same company because he never worked anywhere else, and Flair's were a combination of mostly NWA and WCW championships that WWE retroactively recognized specifically for that storyline, but at one point most certainly did not. Whenever a promotion mentions multi-time world champion, they usually stop there and gloss over the details because it was somewhere they don't want to name. AEW isn't immune to belt shenanigans either. They invented a whole new continental title and tournament just so they could call Eddie Kingston a Triple Crown champion because he grew up idolizing All Japan. Then they merged the continental title under the Unified Championship, sort of, even though I guess that and the international title are still both technically separate. I don't know why they didn't just use 3 existing titles for the Triple Crown in the first place, but hey, I'm famously not Tony Khan. The point is, everyone twists the facts in this business, and everyone's going to have their own version of the truth. Wrestling is all presentation and marketing and narrative. That means Mercedes Moné can, in her own way, still maintain Ultimo Dragon's legacy by not actually beating it, but she still gets the bragging rights and the belt visuals and the Ultimo Moné nickname. Though, I'll repeat, Ultimo Moné was right there. And as a heel, old heads who know history can discredit her by saying it's not real, and that means the gimmick is doing what it's supposed to do, because the simple fact is, none of it's real anyway. It's wrestling. Personally, I'm just doing all this to keep the facts straight. I would not disparage Moné legitimately beating the record, and I would not mind Ultimo keeping it either. If it doesn't happen now, someone else will eventually do it after he retires. And to my knowledge, he actually hasn't said a word about it. He just goes on Instagram and posts pictures of him chilling poolside in Mexico, which, I mean, I would too. Nice work if you can get it. The man's earned it by now. So if Moné technically beating his record is the gray area narrative they're going with, I'm totally fine with that. And if you're not fine with it, that means the story is working. And it means Mercedes Moné is working you. Thanks to my contributors, that guy from AK, Dan Williams, Art, Lowest, Adam Sanderson, One Funky Note, Lino Nwakacha, Rain Gowa, Jade Somil, and to all my Ko-fi donors. Most of these are actually old donations, but some were quite significant, so I'll just keep listing them, I guess. Special thanks to Rookie, whose music you're listening to right now.